All right. So we've been talking about writing a constructed response writing and how we can embellish our writing and lengthen and make our written responses more complex. And so you will find in this document on Google Classroom that at the top, it is talking about all the components for writing a constructed response. We've talked about it in class. So that is there for you. Topic sentence, with title and the author, restate the question, answer the question, explain, use a quote from the text, and use a concluding sentence to finish your story off. There's examples there for you, but I want to move on to the reading here because again, this isn't a reading challenge for you. This is something we're doing for writing. So to give you some background information about the topics that we're going to be writing about, I'm going to tell you about Joshua Chamberlain. So it says, we'll practice this all together. We're going to read about a hero of Brewer, Maine. Yes, Joshua Chamberlain. Chamberlain was born on a farm on Chamberlain Street in Brewer in 1828. He was a professor, a soldier, a governor, a college president, and a port surveyor. In all of these, as a leader and a man of principle and courage, he excelled. So the article is called Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, a Man of Honor, and it's by QUEUEQ, which was like a publishing company or something. There was not an author listed there. So that's what we're using as our author for this, an organization of some sort. All right, here's the house on Chamberlain Street, though. If you ever drive past it, that's the one. So we're jumping ahead here. By the age of 26, Joshua had graduated from Bowdoin College and Bangor Theological Seminary, which is a big deal. I mean, that's 8 years of college right there. Bam, he's done. So what's he going to do with his life? He thought about becoming a missionary, which would mean he might travel the world and help people build houses, spread religious beliefs, etc. But instead, he was offered a position teaching at Bowdoin College, and he just couldn't turn it down. So he became a professor. For one so young, this was a rare opportunity at such a fine college. By 1862, Joshua was concerned about how the Civil War was dividing the Union. So remember that the Civil War started in 1861, and things weren't going in the direction that he had hoped. And so he persuaded the governor of Maine to assign him to one of Maine's regiments, which sounds great, but remember that he was just in college for 8 years and then he became a professor at a university. So he has no background in the military at all. The governor offered him the rank of colonel to head the 20th Maine Regiment, which is a big deal. He knew that he was a master of foreign languages and he knew lots of other subjects. However, he had never been trained as a soldier, so he accepted the rank of lieutenant colonel, and he was second in command to Colonel Adelbert Ames. Now, Ames was a West Point graduate, and he was already a war hero in the Civil War, and he'd been wounded. So he knew his stuff. So this works out well for Joshua. Joshua was off. Okay, I already said that. Chamberlain studied everything he could about warfare. He's reading all the good books. That's what he knows, right? Studying, reading, he can do that. But he also carefully studied Colonel Ames as he trained and led his regiment. So he's looking for his leadership skills and what's working, what's not working, and he's keeping track of all these things. Before long, Ames was given a higher command, and Chamberlain was in command of the 20th Maine. There he is, in all his glory. Despite being ill with malaria, and I don't know how much you know about malaria, but it's not fun. And so he had it while he's working, which means he was probably very sick to his stomach and nauseous and sleepy and just feeling terrible all the time. So other than that, he also faced a difficult problem. Men and even whole regiments could enlist in the Civil War for a given period of time. The 3rd Maine had served its 2 years and was disbanded. So they were allowed to go home after 2 years, right? That was their contract. However, about 100 men had joined late and they still had time left to serve, and they had to serve their 2 years. They were supposed to join the 20th Maine. All but 60 did. So 60 didn't, right? 40 of them did and 60 didn't. Chamberlain was told to shoot as deserters any who didn't join him. But by listening to their complaints, showing sympathy about their problems and feeding them because they were hungry. He won over all but 2 of them. Still suffering from malaria, Joshua took command of his men in the Battle of Gettysburg, which was a big battle in the Civil War. At a small hill later named Little Round Top, his was the last unit on the Union line. If the hill were lost, the enemy could circle behind the Union troops. The battle would be lost. The war would be pretty up in the air at that point. The 20th Maine suffered many casualties as it repelled several assaults. 2 bullets injured Chamberlain. One tore a gash in his foot. The other hit his sword, which was affixed to him, and badly bruised his thigh. Running out of ammunition, Chamberlain and his men fixed bayonets. So he ordered them to fix the bayonets on the front of their rifles and use that as their weapon, which one could do, but one really didn't do. So this was weird. They charged at the Confederate soldiers with their bayonets. Be a little scary to see. And succeeded in driving them back 2 regiments. They're kind of like, what's going on? And they're backing up. They're running from them, these crazy Maine guys. And so they won the Battle of Little Round Top, right? That night, after they've just pulled off a miracle, because remember, they didn't even have ammunition, another regiment refused to advance on a higher hill. This became known as Big Round Top. Chamberlain was asked if he could do it, which is kind of unfair because he just won a huge, he had a huge success that day. Couldn't even take a night off to rest. He decided to go for it. So he asked his men for volunteers. He wasn't going to force them to fight another battle the same day that they just won a huge battle, right? Every one of the men still able to fight volunteered. So with fewer than 200 soldiers, he advanced. They took the hill with little resistance, and the next day, the Battle of Gettysburg ended in a Union victory. Much of the credit was given to the action of the 20th Maine on Little Round Top. Joshua Chamberlain. This is More Counselors Chamberlain's Charge, famous painting. You can still buy from him. He's still around. By June of 1864, Chamberlain was given command of a new 1st Brigade of 5 Pennsylvania regiments. This was just before the Battle of Petersburg. There, Chamberlain was struck by a bullet that entered into his right hip and passed through and came out the left side of his body. Ugh. His wound was so serious that he was left on the battlefield for dead. They just left him there. He wrote a farewell letter to his wife, like, "Dear Fanny, this is it for me." Several generals came and said goodbye to him. General Grant, that's Ulysses S. Grant, learned of Chamberlain's serious condition and awarded him the rank of Brigadier General. He's dying anyway. Let's give him a huge honor. Joshua's brother, on the other hand, was still at the 20th Maine. So remember that Joshua Chamberlain got a new regiment in Pennsylvania. So he left his brother in charge of the 20th Maine. He heard about his brother's injury and he knows where he was just fighting. So he goes and finds him, and he brings with him 2 doctors to try to save his life. They did. And they sent him to a Naval Academy hospital in Annapolis. A long recovery followed. However, pain and recurring infections were to plague him the rest of his life. Nevertheless, despite great pain and discomfort, he miraculously returned to war the following year. General Chamberlain and his horse were wounded again, not the horse, in the Battle of Quaker Road. Still, he led his men in a charge. 2 days later, he was asked to lead another charge, this time against Robert E. Lee, who was like the head of the Confederate Army for the most part. He was to recapture the road he just captured 2 days before. See, he's just working so hard, and then people let these things go. He's got to do it again. He mounted his wounded horse and led his men into battle. It ended with the capture of the entire Confederate regiment. Lee's surrender at Appomattox marked the end of the long Civil War. Grant chose, like Ulysses S. Grant, chose Joshua Chamberlain to accept the surrender of the Confederate Army infantry. As the Confederate units laid down their arms and passed before the Union troops, Chamberlain ordered a salute be given to the men. He knew this would anger many Northerners. However, he felt it was a way to honor the brave men and begin the healing process, because now that we've just fought really, really hard for 4 years and so many people were killed, we're supposed to get along like a happy little family again. Joshua knew that healing was going to take a long time. And so he was trying to show reverence to those people who had fought for the Confederate Army. General Chamberlain left the army in 1866, having been in 24 skirmishes and battles. He returned to his home in Brunswick, Maine, because that's where Bowdoin is, right? We knew that. As a popular war hero, he was asked to run for governor, and he did. And he won by a huge margin, 4 times in a row. Yeah, because back then you had to run for governor every single year. He was not a politician, however, and he failed to side with his party on several key issues. He opposed the harsh treatment of the South. He didn't think that was good for the healing process. He thought the president should be able to fire his own cabinet members and not Congress. He wanted courts to decide key matters on the death penalty. He also thought that Maine's law for stopping the sale or use of alcohol was unenforceable. And as a result of these views, he made many enemies. Here's a picture of Bowdoin College, where he's returning to. Starting now, Chamberlain returned to Bowdoin College as president of the college for the next 12 years. He introduced many new courses there. He set up a science department. He believed in a well-rounded education, and he also wanted women to be admitted to the college, but they weren't. He thought the army would need more trained soldiers in case they go to war again. So he included military training for students. Later, when several classes refused to train, they were expelled. However, Chamberlain devised a compromise. It would allow students to return to college, and all but 2 did. It's a theme going on, right? In 1879, Maine faced a serious problem with state election returns. 2 groups each claimed victory for the seats in the legislature. That's weird. They're both like, we won. No, only one of you could have won. This is a big deal because at the time, the governor was chosen by whichever side held the majority of seats. Anger grew and civil war became a serious threat in Maine, like a Maine civil war. That would be terrible. The governor called upon Chamberlain for help. Rather than call out the militia, Chamberlain met with both sides. He suggested they send their arguments to Maine Supreme Court and let them decide which men were the winners. For 12 days, Chamberlain, who's the president of Bowdoin College, right? Chamberlain, the mayor of Augusta, and local police kept the peace. There were threats to Chamberlain's life. At one point, he went out to face a mob set to kill him. He told him he wanted to see the rightful government seated. He said, I'm here for that, and I shall do it. And if anybody wants to kill me for it, here I am. Let him kill. A veteran in the mob shouted, by God, old general, the first man that dared try to lay a hand on you, I'll kill him on the spot. And with that, the crowd disbanded. Oh yeah, you kind of won this huge war for us. Okay. The court settled the matter, which is what he suggested they do. And Maine was spared its civil war. Again, though, Chamberlain made some powerful enemies. When a seat for the U.S. Senate became open, Chamberlain was the logical choice for the job. However, people didn't elect their senators at the time. They were chosen by the state legislature. Chamberlain's enemies got their revenge. They named someone else to the Senate. Chamberlain ended his career as a port surveyor in Portland, Maine. Still, that's a big deal. He was all but forgotten, except by those who had fought with him in the Civil War. It was 30 years after the Battle of Little Round Top before he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Seriously. This is an honor that is usually given to you in a big service. It's a big deal. The president's there. It's huge. It's the highest honor you can receive. So our country's highest honor arrived in a package delivered by a postman. Chamberlain died at the age of 85, 50 years after he'd been given up for dead at Petersburg. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain was a man of great courage, high principles, and remarkable leadership skills. Chamberlain's a man of honor, well worth remembering. And you'll see there are several constructed responses. We're only doing one at a time. So jump into the one that you're doing and then stop. I'll give you feedback before you move on. Thank you.